What if one of the strangest gospels ever found does not sound fake enough to dismiss, but sounds dangerously close to Jesus? That is the problem with the Gospel of Thomas. It was found near Nag Hammadi in Egypt in 1945. It is non-canonical, usually dated to the mid-2nd century, and it contains 114 sayings of Jesus. With no birth story, no miracles plot, no crucifixion arc, and no resurrection scene. Just sayings, just voice, just verbal pressure, and that alone should make you sit up. Because Thomas does not even try to tell the Jesus story the way the New Testament does. It gives you a Jesus without biography, without narrative scaffolding, almost without history at all. And then it opens with a line that feels less like preaching and more like a dare. Whoever finds the meaning of these sayings will not taste death, not believe the right creed, not join the right church, not to affirm the right doctrine. Understand, interpret, wake up. That is a very different atmosphere from the 4 canonical Gospels. In Thomas, salvation starts sounding less like pardon and more like perception. And that is the first reason Thomas still hits so hard. It does not ask, "Did you accept the story?" It asks, "Did you understand the riddle?" That shift changes everything. Because some of what Thomas says feels deeply familiar. Some sayings sit close to material in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which is one reason scholars still argue over whether Thomas preserves old traditions, later reworkings, or a mix of both. Britannica notes that several sayings have close parallels in the New Testament Gospels, even though the overall theology sits far from the synoptics. So this is not just random spiritual graffiti from the desert. It is close enough to Jesus to feel unsettling, and distant enough to feel like an alternate map. Then Thomas starts getting under the skin. It tells you to seek until you find, and says finding does not bring instant peace. It brings disturbance first. That is psychologically sharp. Thomas understands something modern self-help religion usually hides. Real insight does not arrive wrapped in comfort. It arrives like a cracked mirror. It ruins the easy version of you before it gives you anything deeper. Even the early sayings push toward gnosis, toward hidden recognition, toward the idea that awakening is costly. And then comes the line that makes Thomas feel almost too modern. The kingdom is not up there or out there. It is spread out upon the earth, but people do not see it. That sounds less like an apocalyptic countdown and more like a failure of perception. It is as if Thomas is saying the problem is not that God is absent. The problem is that humans are blind. That is a different kind of Christianity entirely. Not wait for the kingdom, but you are standing in it like a sleepwalker. That is where Thomas starts sounding eerily relevant to now. Because this text feels built for people exhausted by institutions. It does not hand you a church structure. It does not hand you a creed. It hands you sayings that sound like they want to blow holes in the walls of ordinary religious thinking. When Thomas says make the two one, it is not talking like a neat Sunday sermon. It is talking like a text that wants to collapse divisions, inner and outer, above and below, male and female, surface and essence. Thomas is obsessed with integration, with recovering some lost wholeness beneath the fracture of ordinary life. And some of this absolutely matches the walking Jesus energy people already know. The anti-performance streak, the suspicion of religious gatekeepers, the insistence that people are asleep to what is right in front of them, the demand for inner transformation over public piety. That is why Thomas is not easy to laugh off. It contains enough recognizable Jesus fire to feel plausible, and enough strange metaphysical heat to feel destabilizing. It is not just weird, it is adjacent. And adjacent things are harder to dismiss than obvious fakes. Then Thomas goes even further. Jesus says, split a piece of wood and you find him there. Lift a stone and he is there too. That is not just a teacher speaking. That sounds cosmic, almost panentheistic, like Christ diffused through the texture of reality itself. It is one of the reasons Thomas keeps attracting mystics, seekers, and people who suspect religion got shrunk somewhere along the way. Canonical Jesus often speaks of the kingdom through parables. Thomas's Jesus sometimes sounds like he is hidden in the molecules, And now the real question starts to burn. Why was this left out? The easy answer is because it was heretical. And yes, the church fathers treated Thomas as outside the canon. And Britannica says the text is grounded in Gnosticism and stresses salvation through self-knowledge. But that answer is not enough. The deeper answer is more uncomfortable. Thomas preserves a version of Christianity where the center of gravity is not the cross, not the empty tomb, not sin management, but awakened sight. That is a threat to any institution that needs authority to flow from the outside in. Thomas keeps hinting that the deepest thing is already buried within, waiting to be recognized. But Thomas is not all luminous brilliance. It also has teeth in the wrong places. Its final saying is one of the most jarring in early Christian literature. Peter says women are not worthy of life, and Jesus replies that he will make Mary male so she can enter the kingdom. Scholars and interpreters have wrestled with that line for years, some reading it symbolically as transcending gendered division, others seeing it as a sign of the text's harsh ascetic and male-centered logic. Either way, the point is not that Thomas is secretly perfect. The point is that it is volatile. It gives you moments of breathtaking spiritual insight and moments that feel like a theological fever spike. And maybe that volatility is exactly why it matters. Because the Gospel of Thomas shatters the fantasy that early Christianity was one smooth river flowing in a single direction. It was contested, strange, plural, unstable. There were rival emphases, rival voices, rival ways of understanding who Jesus was and what salvation meant. Thomas stands there like evidence that the early Jesus movement was not born wearing a finished uniform. It was a fight over memory, meaning, authority, and access to the divine. So the craziness of the Gospel of Thomas is not just that it says bizarre things. It is that it sounds at moments like a version of Jesus the modern church can still recognize. Then it swerves and sounds like a version the modern church no longer knows what to do with. And that should disturb people more than the weirdness itself, because a text that is obviously fake is easy. A text that is partly familiar is hard. A text that feels spiritually alive, theologically dangerous, and historically inconvenient all at once. That is the real problem. Maybe Thomas was excluded because it drifted too far. Maybe it was excluded because it came too late. Maybe it was excluded because it made salvation feel too inward, too secret, too unstable for a church trying to build public order. The Gospel of Thomas does not just ask whether early Christianity was stranger than we were taught. It asks whether some versions of Jesus were buried not because they said nothing true, but because they said the truth in a form that power could not safely manage.